The video that I did on easy ways to be your own GM wasn't the first solo RPG video I did for the channel, but it has proved to be the most popular to date. In that video, I talked about 4 different resources that soloists could use to create rich solo sessions and to create a play that would move the story forward and reduce the possibility of stalling and getting to dead ends. Those were, generally speaking, what I called generative resources, which are basically things like random tables, for example. I talked about suggestive resources, which are things that could, for example, come from your board games that you have, perhaps maps or cards or other components from board games that already have a story or mechanics attached to them. They already suggest something. I talked about restrictive resources, which are oracle tables. That is to say, something that restricts a direction of a story. You ask an open-ended question and you get an answer. So there's a narrowing of that, something restrictive. And finally, something I called the rubric, which is another way of saying the rules. I presented those 4 general resource categories in that video, and I did give some examples of them through the course of that video. But what I didn't do, and what this video is going to do, is to demonstrate a gameplay explicitly tying the gameplay to the resource categories that I talked about in that video. Pretty much all the Geek Gamers videos utilize, I would say, almost all 4 of these kinds of resources because this is my approach to solo RPGing. But as I said, oftentimes I'm not necessarily explicitly linking what I'm using to the categories in that video. And since that video and those categories have proved so popular, so much so that other people are picking up the lingo in their own videos when talking about solo RPGing, I thought I would do a video now that explicitly links what I'm using to those concepts. Like recent videos on the channel, I'm following my new format, which is to say that if you continue watching, you're going to get right into the story. If you want to know how I got to that story and all the behind the scenes decisions that I made and the 4 different types of resources that I used and how I put them together, you can skip ahead in this video to the behind the scenes part and then go back and watch the story. Or you can watch the story first as we find out what happens when a witch, a bookseller, and a deadly forest interact. Irja Utila looked through the blood-stained windows of her alchemy laboratory. Bodies were piled high along the stone tower walls. Her men had worked hard to fend off the vicious advance. They were almost as devoted as she was to fighting back against the encroaching darkness of the cult. What they didn't know is that she was running out of time. The librarian, only weeks away in the depths of the forest, was dying. Without Irja's help, he would not survive long enough to give her the key to the library where the foundations of her magic lived. A week's journey through the war-torn countryside, she was lucky to have her magic broom, as it would allow safe passage and she could avoid encountering any of the monsters of the Isles. Gazing back at the gates, she took a long look at a glass image of a bird in flight, wishing that indeed she was the kind of witch who could use her broom to fly. But hers was not that kind of broom, and ours is not that kind of story. All right, so Urja Utila is trying to leave the tower, get into the forest undetected, and we know that there are enemy bodies lying around. We don't know whether there are remaining enemies hiding, and I don't even need to roll on that. I'm gonna say that there are. The question really is, can she just leave undetected and sort of get away from at least whoever this is to get into the forest initially? And I will say we'll do an oracle roll here, and we're going to say that we'll just say it's unlikely. It's unlikely that she can, and maybe we'll get lucky. Who knows? We'll just do a straight roll. Well, definitely not. We got very no there. So we are detected, and now I'm going to say, can she somehow hide or escape? She's detected in some way, but can she do something with her skills to circumvent an inevitable encounter right away out of the gate, basically. And so we're going to be calling that a hard check to do, whether she could do that. So the difficulty level on that is 13, and she'll be using, say, her dexterity, so +1, and she's out in nature, so we're going to get a +2 to whatever we roll, which is a 10. Ah, we just missed. We just missed. So, in fact, there's going to be an encounter right out of the gate, and I guess the encounter is going to be whoever it is that from this dark cult that has been attacking the castle. And I have my D20 table of possibilities here, so let's see who it is. It is 16. A vengeful deceiver is she's going to be encountering a vengeful deceiver, and let's take a look at who that could be, what that is. Well, only one appears, so that's great. An AC of 7, morale of 12, 5 hit dice. They've got, okay. This new Gui is created when placatory funeral rites prove insufficient to calm an outraged spirit, and their vengeful purpose is clothed in the power of an undead form. So a zombie-ish figure here is going to be one of the minions of the dark cult, and perhaps this suggests to us, we didn't really identify who was the mastermind of this dark cult. Maybe it is some type of necromancer. Now, it says an immaterial Nugui is invisible to mundane senses and can be harmed only by magic or magical weapons, though it cannot physically interact with the world. It may tangibly manifest as any friend or relative of its chosen victim. Interesting, perfectly mimicking their speech, dress, and appearance. Though it is not gifted with any special knowledge that person may possess that it has not secretly spied out. Its stats remain as given above regardless of its form, whether material or intangible. If slain in its manifested form, its corpse will evaporate and it will be forced into immateriality for 1d6 weeks. Well, here's the thing. We're a witch, and we are not even close to being a witch that's going to be deceived by somebody sort of posing as our friend, if we even have friends. And we do have this spell, Apprehending the Imbalance. I don't know that that's going to help, though. It allows us to study a target, immediately apprehending the presence of any diseases, poisons, curses, magical effects, or spiritual possession. And it doesn't really give us information. I don't know that that's going to impact. If we successfully cast that, would that impact anything about would we say that would impact anything about our interaction here? Could we try I think we're going to go to the Oracle and we're going to ask, because I don't know. So I'm just going to say it's unknown, and fate will decide. Can this spell help? And indeed it can help. So we're going to cast this spell, Apprehending the Imbalance, and see if that can have an impact. So we see this zombie-esque monstrosity coming toward us, and the first thing that we can do is we can roll our fray die. Now, our fray die, unfortunately, is only a d4. Ooh, we rolled a 4. That's awesome. So we, right off the bat, did 4 points of damage against its hit dice. We could possibly get rid of this right away. We just got 4 points off of its 5-point hit die. And we take our broom now. That's really the only weapon we have, and we are getting ready to utilize it. Now, it did say that it has to be a magical weapon, and this is a magical weapon. This broom obviously is a magical broom. The successful casting of the spell, I skipped over that. That spell is, we cast that spell upon ourselves, and thematically what I'm saying is it's going to give me a 1 point additional benefit to the attempt at striking the blow. And the way that works is you're rolling 1d20, you're adding any relevant modifiers. In this case, it would be our strength modifier. We don't have any strength modifier. We're adding the target's AC, which is 7, and we're going to get an additional 1 because we cast that spell upon ourselves. So we're basically getting a +8 to this roll, and we need a 20 or more for a successful hit, and that is fail. So even with all of that, we rolled so poorly that we did no damage. Now, it's only at 1 hit die, but it's going to come at us, and it's sort of enraged at this point. and it is going to be attacking us now. So this thing is going to come at us, and it's going to come at us with a d20 roll plus a 9, which is our AC, plus its 1 hit bonus, and look, it's rolling badly too. So it had a plus 10 modifier, but it only rolled a 2, so it missed. So we are so lucky right now because we get out of the way of this thing, or hide behind a tree, or envelop ourselves in the steady rain that is falling. That I failed to show the roll on camera, but I earlier rolled for the weather of a steady rain. Whatever it is, the case may be, we are back to a new round of fighting. Now, in this game, you can roll your fray die for each round. And we all know there's only, we're going to get rid of it this way because there's only one hit die left for this vengeful deceiver. And so it falls to the ground, and we don't even take the time to examine the body. We escape off into the woods, and we are on our way to find the cathedral ruins and the librarian. And the rain continues to fall, continues to be evening. And so we head off into the woods, and as we do that, I'm going to turn to the material in Scarlet Heroes and just give a roll here to see, I don't know, what's happening, what the feeling is. We got a d20 and a 2d20 roll that we can do. So we will read this. Green is across and pink is down. So a 20 and a 17. And this brings us to, well, vengeance, of course. So vengeance is the feeling that we have right now. So in my story, I think what this is telling me is it's allowing a little more of an uncovering of the connection between Irja and the bookseller, the dying bookseller in the ruined castle, that she is out for vengeance against the corrupting force of this dark cult that is trying to take away the magic, and that the librarian has been preserving, and he's been the keeper of the secrets there. And as she wanders through into the castle and sees the resistance fighters who are tied to poles along this road, she is motivated to defy the dark forces that are threatening to take away her magic. And as they encroach, she's even more motivated to get to the cathedral ruins. And she passes by the remains of the shrine that has a tapestry, a sort of faded, moldy tapestry depicting the heroes of the past, her sisters in fight in the past, who have struggled over the years to preserve this magic. And as the dawn begins to appear, as the sun comes up through the trees of the forest, and she looks for a place of shelter, she is fueled in her efforts by the desire to preserve her legacy of magic. As the day progresses, and as she is in hiding from the marauders in the land, we need to do a check to see whether she has successfully managed to spend the entire day hidden without interruption, resting and whatever. So for this, we're going to say that that's going to be hard to do. So that's going to be a check difficulty of 13. And we're going to use her wisdom with a +1, and we'll also add our modifier here for the nature affinity. So we're going to give a roll +2 to whatever we get. And so she does pass the evening, pass the day into the evening undisturbed. And as the moon begins to rise, she needs to continue on her journey and continue to move in the night forest. And we will say that this continues to be difficult, and perhaps maybe it's just an average task at this point. She's getting into the forest. Nobody's pursuing her. So we're going to say that's an average. We're going to still get our +2. And so she's traveling along without any difficulty here. So as she is continuing along, we're going to give a roll to this oracle table with the adjectives and motivations, reading green across and pink down. So that will be the 19th entry here, Fury. So she's becoming increasingly angered at the situation. We did say that it was the wet season, so let's roll for some sort of wilderness event here. Well, let's see, first of all, before we roll for the event, let's go to the oracle table and say, is some event going to happen? And I'm going to go again just with street, like who knows, unknown, no modifier. So will we have some kind of an event? 17, definitely. We will have some kind of an event, and this is going to be a D12 table, and let us see what happens during the wet season here in the forest. What is happening here? Foot fungus, no move for 1d4 days. Okay, so what this means is, well, that's 3 days. She's got to sit with a foot fungus. So that is, that's putting her in a little bit of a vulnerable situation here in the forest with her foot fungus. And I think what we need to ask now the oracle is, as the daytime is approaching, so it took her all night to get this foot fungus, and so as she is sort of sitting with this foot fungus now for 3 days, I'm going to ask, is it likely that somebody's going to see her there, somebody's going to find her there? And I'm going to say that, is it likely, yes or no? How likely is it that she will be seen? And I'm going to roll on that it's pretty likely that somebody's going to come across her in these 3 days of her immobility with the foot fungus. So let's see if that's the case. And indeed, yes. So somebody does come upon her, and let's see who it could possibly be. We're going to go to the, it's not going to be, this is different than a sort of wandering monster. It's going to be some type of NPC sort. And let's quickly roll up somebody. We'll go to, the first thing we'll do is we'll give a D3 roll to see whether it's a commoner, someone from the underworld, or somebody elite and noble. So we'll give it, this is a D3, and we got a 3. So it's some sort of elite person, and that's actually good for her because, as you may recall, she has this cultural affinity of 2, so nobility. So she has a benefit when interacting with nobility because she was from a noble family, or she's just not your kind of average witch. So now we're going to go and see who this is. This is a D8 and a D10 roll together, and we'll roll that up. Oh, we got an 8 and an 8, and an 8 and an 8 brings us to a wealthy landowner. So clearly what's happened here is she has camped out for 1d4 for 3 days with her foot fungus on the lands that in this forest, that there is a wealthy landowner that she did not know about, and this person has come and on his own, perhaps he's out for a ride over his lands, and she encounters this person, and let's see whether is it going to be, well, it's going to be an NPC stranger. We don't really know what the reaction is going to be, but we'll fall under the category, we'll go with just a stranger. So on that, it's a 2d6 roll there. We got a 9. To see the reaction is pleased consent. So this wealthy landowner is pleased to see her. Well, why? Probably because of some past relationship that they had. And I know there's a prior relationship table here in Scarlet Heroes, one of the very many excellent tables that they have. And we're going to roll on that and see what their connection was. Now, we're going to have to interpret this roll because we know that this person is happy to see her. So we need this is a D100 roll. So let's see, what was the prior relationship of this wealthy landowner to our foot fungus hiding out witch? Yeah, no. Let's just say he knows many witches. Okay, so our landowner here knows many witches. Well, why? Because he is the landowner upon whose land this magical or ruined library has been. And in fact, he is in allegiance with the witch and the bookseller to fight off this dark cult because he is in fact a good person, and the land in which Elfland, in which he is the in which he is a very important noble in the hierarchy of Elfland, was the archive, the repository for the magical books was under his purview. And so he is very happy to see this witch, and he is actually offering to take her with him on to his horse because she has the foot fungus and apparently can't walk. So he takes Irja Otila with him on the horse off to the library, therefore truncating some of her journey such that she is certain to get there before the demise of the librarian and to be reunited with the key that is going to lead her to the source of all her magic knowledge and energy, and such that she will be able to be the savior for the magic, the good magic that is within her. And she is thus fulfilling the mandate of our original adventure tag, which was this good location, that something here is exceptionally good. And she has been able to make her way toward the source of that good with hope for the future that she will be able to continue to restore the good magic to the land. All I know so far is that I'm going to do something on wilderness. So we'll give it a d20 roll and see what the adventure tag is. That's going to be a 9. Good location. All right, let's see what, that's pretty generic, good location. This patch of wilderness or long lost site is exceptionally good for some purpose. It may have a remarkably defensible location, be near valuable mineral lodes, have auspicious geomantic energies, or otherwise be worth fighting over for those who would have it. All right, so let's now turn to what I said I was going to use as my suggestive resource, which is this game, Divine Right, or something from this game, and it's going to be the map, obviously, from this game. I have done a video on this game. I love this game. What I'm using this for here right now is not this game, however. We're going to use the map, and we're taking a look here at the amazing map from Divine Right, and there are so many options of places we could be. The Forbidden Oasis, Spires to the Sun, the Blasted Heath. We could be in this fortress or this Split Rock Pass. There's a border forest that's kind of related to the suggestion possibly that we got there. There's an area for the Wasted Dead. It's very, very rich with suggestions. However, where we are going to be is here. We're going to be at this Invisible School of Thaumaturgy, and this is at the borderland of the Elfland area and the wetlands here. I don't really know, and there's Forest of the Lurking right off to the east here. There's some mountains and marshes and lowlands. I don't know. I don't know if this is going to even come into play so much, but I do love the idea of the Invisible School of Thaumaturgy being our place of residence for the beginning or the outset of this adventure. Here we can take a look at it located more clearly in the map. And as you can see, when you're going to a suggestive resource like a board game, exactly that happens. It gives you a suggestion, and I'm going to go with that suggestion. I had sort of forgotten about this as a location in the game, but it's pretty compelling. It's more compelling than anything I got immediately from the Scarlet Heroes adventure tag. So we are going to go with that. And one of the challenges of bringing in board game materials is to know how far to go with it. And especially when you're dealing with something like a game that has RPG elements to it, like Divine Right. Might as well just show, these are the credits to Divine Right, and as I said, I have a video on it, and I recommend checking that out if any of this looks interesting to you. I'm also noticing here there is a random events table as part of the game Divine Right, so that may come into play, as it were, also in what we're doing. But forget about focusing too much on the physical space right now of this, say, room or academy or castle we're in. It's a castle. It's a magical academy castle, and we are maybe an alchemist in this castle, or a teacher of some sort in this castle, or maybe we're the student. I don't know. Let's go back to Scarlet Heroes here and see if, I mean, we could just be a human magic user. I mean, that's sort of not typically what I would do, but maybe we're a witch. Maybe we're a witch. We're a witch. We're going to be a witch. We're a witch. We're a witch here in this magical castle. Maybe this is a witch's magical castle or something like that. So we're going to be a witch, and that's what we're going to be. So I guess a witch is human. I don't know. We're going to be a witch. We're going to be in this castle, and the best thing I'm going to do, I think I'm going to go leave this for a second and just roll up the character. Character creation in Scarlet Heroes is pretty easy. You are going to be rolling 4d6 and dropping the lowest die number. And these are very recognizable attributes: strength, intelligence, dexterity, wisdom, constitution, and charisma. You can put the values wherever you like. So what we will do is we'll do the rolls, and then we'll assign them based on our character concept here. So we are going to be just noting down the numbers and moving them into the slots after we get the rolls. And I'm just showing you whoops, I forgot to roll that one. Showing you the rolls on camera so that you can see I'm doing it on the up and up. Not rolling so great. 7, 8. There is a function, if you don't get a certain high value, you can add one in. We'll talk about that in a second. 9, 10, 11, 12. This is so far not great. And that's something slightly better. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And my last number is going to be better still. So that is going to be my 15. All right. It says if you didn't get a 16 or better, you can pick an attribute and set it to 16, because a hero is going to be good at something. And for the game, you're actually not working with the values that you roll, but you're working with the modifiers off of this chart. And we'll go into the rules in a moment. So we can change one of our values to a 16, and there really isn't a rule for it. Doesn't specify, at least as far as I've been able to tell, do we need to change the highest value to 16, or can we change the lowest value? So for example, whatever that 8 would be could become a 16. That's a very big difference, actually, in the character. What we're looking at for 9 to 12 is going to be no modifier. So anything, this is just going to be no modifier, no modifier. This will be the negative modifier here of a -1. And we have 13 to 15 is going to be a +1. So we're, that's basically what we're looking at here. The witch, I think, should probably, the magic user should probably have the high level of intelligence. So we could give that a 16, which would be correspondent to a +2. And we could, if we wanted to, turn this 8 into a 16. I think, per the rules. If somebody knows differently, they should let me know, because I've always wondered about that, actually. And then we need to assign the rest of our values. I think I will make my charisma the 11. Some of it, to some extent, doesn't matter because there's no difference, for example, between an 11 and a 12 in this regard. So we'll give the Constitution a 12. We've got one more 12 to deal with, and then a 14 and a 15. I think we'll give the Strength on a 12, and then the Dexterity and Wisdom will be the 14 and the 15. So that's our stats, and then the relevant modifier. So again, this is going to be no modification, and the 14 is going to be a +1. The 15 will be a +1. The 12 is nothing, and the 11 is similarly nothing. So we're coming in with intelligence, dexterity, and wisdom with our modifiers there for the basic rolls. And we are going to be a witch. The next thing we need to do is we need to record our class abilities, and we have starting HP as assigned if we are a magic user is going to be simply 4. This is going to be modified by our Constitution score, which is no modifier. Your starting attack bonus is 0 for a magic user. The Fray die, which we will talk about what that is as we play the game, is going to be a D4 for a magic user. And next we're going to choose some traits. Now, in Scarlet Heroes, traits are what you have instead of skills, and you have a certain number of points to assign to these traits. So the way you can think about this is like something that your character has been good at, or a background characteristic of your character. And in this case, I'm already thinking that I'm picturing this witch trying to maybe make a potion or something and go off in the land. Maybe she has to go to Elfland, who knows, I don't know, to do something. So she's gonna have been or will be a master alchemist, and that is going to get her, I'm going to assign 1 point there. I'm also going to say she's a really stereotypical witch, and she has a black cat familiar. And her black cat familiar is probably not going to play a huge role in the game, except we know that he's there. And his name is Jeffrey. Jeffrey is the black cat familiar. And what this tells me is that she has an affinity for nature. She has some type of nature affinity that is a trait of hers. And perhaps her alchemy also has to do with, maybe she's like an herbologist or something, or she travels out and finds things and makes those types of magical potions with toads and things of that nature. And her third trait, well, she is a human, or was a human, or is related to humans, or something. I'm going to give her a characteristic. Not only does she have a nature affinity, but I'm going to give her some sort of, say, cultural, well, we'll just call it an affinity. What does that mean? Well, that means that should she encounter someone of a noble birth, she is going to somehow get some kind of benefit. So maybe she was a former nobility or something of that nature. There's both in Scarlet Heroes and in Divine Right, there is a concept of the nobility. And so we're going to give her some benefit. Should that arise, we're going to give her that benefit. So those are her traits. She's a master at alchemy and spell making, potion making, and she has a particular affinity for things that have to do with the natural world. She has her familiar with her Jeffrey, and she also has a cultural affinity. Not a huge benefit for anyone, so she's a little bit of an all-around, but those are her traits. Now we get some bonus traits with as a human, we get 2 points of bonus traits. So we can assign these how we want. Maybe we'll just spread them out here. Instead of giving her another trait, maybe we'll just assign them this way. So those are for being human. She's lived a little bit more with nature. Well, you know what? Actually, let's do it let's do it this way. Probably not that big a deal. Next up, we're going to buy our equipment, and we're going to roll 3d10 for this and multiply it by 10 to see how much gold we have. 8, 9, 10, 11. So we have 110 gold. Here's a look at the gear and components list. In the interest of time, I just did this off camera, and I kept thematic for certain things. So for example, my one-handed weapon, which is going to do 1d10 of damage, is also a quote-unquote broom, and I'm going to be able to fly on that. I've got some leather armor, which will offer an AC of 7. And I also I spent a lot of money, 50 gold on fine clothes, because my backstory here has to do in some manner this cultural affinity part, this nobility. I felt I had to have her outfitted nicely. She's not some witch off in the wilderness somewhere, but rather somebody who has been or is part of society. I don't know. We're going to see how that develops. She's going to be carrying 10 oil flasks, which can be thrown up to 3 feet to do 1d6 damage against an AC of 9. And rather than scribe's tools, she's going to have some basically witches' writing tools or something like that. I felt I needed to give her something of that nature. Oh, actually, I see this. She can have any weapon, but limited to 1d4 damage. So I need to change that. So that broom, whatever, she'll have that, but it's just a 1d4 damage, and she can have no armor. Aha. So I need to fix that. I made a mistake there. All right, I will fix that and readjust. She's going to get the number of spells equal to 2 plus her intelligence modifier. And her intelligence modifier is 2. And so she's going to start with 4 spells. And the key point here on the fray die, we're going to go into the basic rules overview in a moment. So we'll start with a fray die. A fray die is an extra die that one can roll before combat begins if you are encountering an enemy at your level or lower than your level. And it does damage if you do whatever you roll. Now, for the magic user, it says that fray die can affect any target, even one stronger than you. Other classes can't use their fray die to harm stronger foes. She only has a d4 as a fray die, so she could do 1 to 4 points of damage just at the outset for any level of target. And I think for this game, this demo, I think I'm going to just start with level 1, so it's not going to really have too much of an impact. But here are the magic user spells, and we're going to be limited to the first level spells here. There's 10 of them. We're going to have to be able to choose up to 4. And I think also in the interest of time, I will figure this out off camera. And I've decided on Apprehending the Imbalance, which is a spell that allows the user to immediately apprehend the presence of any diseases, poisons, curses, magical effects, or spiritual possession. So this will help us perhaps if we are traveling around and need to understand our environment. Calling forth the spirit. This is a minor spirit snared from some distant realm and embodied in a fragile shell. Can't see that off, sorry. This entity has these stats, and it appears in a human-like shape of the caster's devising and will obey intelligently the commands of its summoner for the duration of the spell. I'm choosing that spell being mindful of the fact that I have very low HP and a weapon that only does 1d4 damage. And I'm choosing the Lens of the Enlightened Scribe. This is allowing me to read many ancient things without necessarily knowing the language. So I can read any text, magical or otherwise, as if it were written in my native language. It lasts a minimum 10 minutes per level, but it will not end until the caster stops reading a text. So should we encounter something that might be a little too specific, but we're going to go with it. And we're also going with 7 Small Thunders. This is, in essence, Firebolt. Aerial virtues of storm and light are compressed into small bolts of lightning and storm clouds. For each 2 levels of the caster or fraction thereof, 1 bolt can be heard at any target within range. So this, I have a bolt, strikes automatically and does 1d6 plus 1 damage die, inflicting 1 to 2 points of damage. I cannot wear any armor, so we will remove our leather armor and AC of 7. That gives us an AC of 7. We could be carrying like a healer's bag. You know, I don't know that we're going to get that detailed. We'll give ourselves a healer's bag for whatever it's worth. Now, to go over the rules briefly, we already talked about the modifiers that you're getting. It could be from a -3 to a +3, depending on your particular stats. And we know that the modifiers of our witch range from +2 to nothing. To do a check, you're rolling 2d8 and you are going to add the relevant attribute modifier and any trait that is also relevant. And then if your total is equal to or greater than the difficulty of the check, you succeed. And if it's less, things don't work out for you. So for example, for an average test, let's say an average intelligence test, we're rolling our die. Well, we don't even need any modifiers here because we already exceeded it. But let's say our roll was a 9. We would add our intelligence modifier, which is a 2. So that brings us to 11. That would then bring us to the success. And if it were something related to one of our traits, like nature affinity, for example, if we were trying to discern something in nature, we would get yet another addition. And there's also some saving throws. So saving throws is when it is basically a check as an opposed as against something. So that works slightly differently. What you're doing there is you are also rolling your 2d8. You're adding in your character level as well. So in this case, we're having a 1 character level. And the difficulty for the saving throw is always 9 plus the level of either the creature or the hazard or the trap or whatever it is that's causing you difficulty. So if you were encountering a level 1 creature who is trying to poison you, for example, to resist that poison, the difficulty of that would be a 10. 9 plus 1 is 10. It's time to go to some of the generative resources and give a little environment to where our witch is. We still don't have a name for her, actually. But before we get to that, I suppose we're going to stick her in a castle. And, well, again, it's a magical academy, but I've got a little castle table here. So we're going to go and do a D100 roll, see how big this thing is. In this story, for the most part, I think she's going to be just here alone, perhaps. 20, let's see what we get. Again, I'm turning to these to help form the basis of the story that you saw earlier on in the video. We got a 20. It's a small. Oh, it's a tower. Okay, so that actually fits with sort of more of a lone person there. So she's in a tower, and maybe we will give her a companion. We'll get to that though. We know from our map that she's kind of in the mountains here. We can see this, that she's surrounded by, there's mountains here. This maybe represents her castle. There's a water area and some rivers. Let's see here, so there's a lake here, and this could be an enchanted lake with some monster guarding it. We could think that as a possibility. And let's see a little bit about where she might be in this castle. I could, if I wanted to, of course, I'm just sort of doing this myself, I could say, well, there's D4 items. I'm going to be rolling 4 D6 items, but I'm not going to really do it that way. Just going to do a few rolls. There's pots, there's books, and some vials. There's cinders in the vials, whatever that is, whatever that could mean. Let's see, what does it sound like to be here? There's a humming sound. And we'll give the castle a little more information, minor features of interest of this castle. Well, we know that it's a magical castle 98. A statue fashioned from what seems like a single enormous diamond depicts a bird in flight over the main gates. So we have some type of diamond structure depicting a bird. And let's give this castle a name. Or I should say, discover a name of this castle. This is Castle Redbrick. B-R-Y-K-K. Castle Redbrick, which is also the invisible school of thaumaturgy. So Castle Redbrick is the magical school, but it's invisible. Perhaps this diamond statue of this bird, this bird flies to the school, and when it gets to the gates of the school, it turns into some type of glass or something that reveals the invisible school. We could choose to have some type of overseer. Maybe this could just be who we are. This is a D20 table for the lord of the castle. Now we rolled a 6. We did say that, well, a male human fighter is not fitting my story because let's just make this be her. Let's make this be her. Irja Utila. So Irja, which Irja is her name? I-R-J-A, which Irja? Let's see if there is some type of hook or oddity or opportunity here. The castle has just been attacked. There we go. The castle has just been attacked. The defenders, that's Irja Utila, repelled the attack, and the bodies of the fallen lie scattered about its walls. The defenders are busy tending their wounded, and so on, and are suspicious of the party. So we were under attack in some way, whoever we were in this castle, and maybe there will be, and we successfully defended, but this goes back to, this supports the one aspect of that original adventure hook that we got from Scarlet Heroes, which had to do with this being a good location. And part of what was suggested here was that it's exceptionally good for some purpose. It may have a remarkably defensible, be near valuable mineral lodes or whatever, but it's worth fighting over for those who would have it. So that it is in the middle of some fight or war, and she just repelled those invaders, and that's probably where we're opening up the story. Will give us some ruins in the countryside. So ruins dot the countryside, and let's see, we're going to roll up how many types of ruins around here. I guess we could do it with the cardinal points. We could do 4. Well, we're going to do 3. So we're going to get three indications of ruins here. The first being fluted pillars entangled in ivy support the cracked and sagging roof of a small rectangular shrine. A vacant pedestal rests in the middle. Faded, moth-eaten tapestries depict a hero's rise to fame. So somewhere in the outskirts of this invisible magical school, Castle Redbrick, lie some type of ruins or remains of a shrine. Perhaps it was devoted to the person who founded this school. A hero's rise to fame. This hero could have been a magician. It's a magical school after all. So we'll make a note of that as one of the ruins. Roll 80 on page 21 in case we want to go back to that. And let's do 2 more rolls here. 52. The broken stubs of marble pillars surround a 3-foot deep pool of a former bathhouse. Cracked mosaics on the pool bottom, covered in sludge, depict fantastical sea creatures. So there is some depiction of fantastical sea creatures, and this may or may not be related to the nearby magical, well, this is called a well, but clearly it looks like a lake of Lered, so that's not too far away, and perhaps there is a magical sea creature that lives there that has been depicted historically on our lands here. And finally, 23, pieces of stone denote the foundations of a small manor house. A well rests nearby. Well, there is actually a well there. Its interior pushed outward and distorted as if something's huge slithered out. So there might have been at some point, or maybe there still is, some type of wandering sea creature around here. And we will make note of this as well. It may or may not come into play directly in the story. We could also have, let's get one more thing. We're going to roll for a large ruin, and there'll be one large ruin somewhere, 73. And this is moss-covered boulders lie under the skeletal arches of a once grand cathedral. A few rooms near the interior remain intact, their doors recently repaired and barred from within. So there is some type of ruins of a grand cathedral nearby, and the suggestion that these are barred from within also supports the notion that there have been some type of traveling enemies around the area that perhaps attacked it. Perhaps who's ever in this cathedral is related to our witch in defending the area. And now we can go to Scarlet Heroes, and let's go and find out how far away is that cathedral. The smaller ruins, I'm going to assume, were within range, but we're going to look here for distant things. We're going to see how far away that cathedral is. That's a D8 roll, and we learn that the cathedral is within a week's ride. So within a week's ride, there is some other cathedral, and perhaps there is somebody there that is also under attack. And maybe we will be finding out who that is and traveling there. We shall see. Clearly, this is some type of war-torn land. And the last thing I'm going to do right in this section to fill out a little bit more information is this. This D100 table from GM Gems, a great resource. All right. 46. The local military governor has tied the bodies of 9 resistance fighters to poles along the road as an example to others. So there are resistance fighters. So this is giving me the sense that our Urja Utila witch is existing here in this invisible school, besieged by something, and a week's or so walk away there are the ruins of another structure or grand cathedral that is also being besieged, and the ruler of the land is sending a warning out to these resistance fighters, and she is, of course, the resistance fighter. Let's go to an oracle now and see. Working within Scarlet Heroes, I want to go to this oracle and ask the question, what is the likelihood that whoever occupies the ruins of this cathedral is going to be somebody that we need to get to help us or something like that? What is the likelihood of that? How likely is it? Either unknown or likely, because, well, I'm going to say it's likely because they were also depicted as being sort of defended against something. So we got a 16. So yes, so that's going to be a strong yes, that who's ever in this ruined cathedral maybe needs our help or something. Let's actually find out. Let's find out who is in that cathedral. One of the many excellent random tables in Scarlet Heroes is this quick character generation, 2 tables really, and we're going to go to it and show you how easily you can create a little backstory for somebody and as an NPC. Now in our case, this is going to be possibly somebody significant. We rolled an 11, which is going to give us a human, and we rolled a 5 off of that, which is going to give us a human magic user. Okay, and we rolled an 18. So an 18 here corresponding to the magic user is going to be a bookseller. Interesting, a bookseller. Now we can also roll for qualities and relationships. I'm going to do that roll separately. So we've got a human magic user bookseller who's in that ruined cathedral. Perhaps that ruined cathedral was some type of archive, magical archive. I've begun to sort of sketch out the land here. We've got our castle. We're really in a tower. Our witch is in a tower. We have this a week away. Now, of course, if she's flying by broomstick, I'm not sure. We have to figure that part out. But in any case, there's these cathedral ruins that we now know are inhabited by a human magic user bookseller, and perhaps who was under siege. And perhaps the scenario here is that our protagonists are guarding some type of magic that is of threat to they are resisting the people who are trying to take away their magic, and their compadres are these resistance fighters who are tied to poles along this road. That's represented by the threat, and she is in this castle was able to successfully repel. There's bodies. Maybe we need to figure out who they're being attacked from, but it's clear this is a bookseller. She is a witch, that they're defending some type of magic. And maybe this is why their school has become invisible. That was a spell cast, perhaps, to protect its secrets and maybe even its entire location from whoever in the land is trying to steal the magic or curtail the magic or something like that. Let's give a roll to find out some quality of the bookseller. Superb balance. That doesn't really tell me a lot. I mean, I guess they're steadfast. We can translate that into that they are steadfast. Maybe this bookseller is also the kind of librarian or the keeper of the secrets and the lore of the library. So they are steadfast in doing that. And finally, we're going to roll for the relationship. So this would be the relationship between PC Urja Otila and this bookseller. And we got a 10, which brings us to the relationship Destroyer of a Dark Cult. Let's see, relationships, Destroyer of a Dark Cult. What does that tell me? Well, it doesn't really tell me a lot. I mean, to fit my story, I suppose the bookseller could have been the first line of defense against maybe what's trying to take over this good magic is this dark cult. Remembering that our overarching adventure tag here for this place was that it was a good place. So perhaps the librarian bookseller has been protecting these places from this dark cult, and that is the relationship described there is not the relationship necessarily between my PC and the bookseller, but rather between the bookseller and the rest of the land, or our PCs and the rest of the land. So we're going to note down Destroyer of a Dark Cult, and this gives us the concept of some kind of dark cult. And from this concept, I'm going to look this is going to signal me back to the Scarlet Heroes listing of Monsters of the Isles. And I'm going to look through here and create a thematically driven random table that I can roll on if we are going to encounter someone, because we're going to go with this concept of dark cult as the opposition, the enemy that we would be fighting against if we were, or encountering and having to deal with if and when we have encounters. And the final consideration is to what extent I'm going to try to map closely my journey to this key terrain here. If we leave, I haven't figured this out yet. I think it's just going to develop organically, trying to figure that maybe we'll say the library is here in this named spot, or actually this picture perhaps, and just we could be walking through the forest and maybe have an encounter with some water. I don't know. This part I'm not really sure about yet, but loosely speaking, I'm conceptualizing that we are leaving here and our journey somehow is to get to this spot. And here is a look inside the notebook as it stands now. I went through the Monsters of the Isles and I chose 20 of them that I think could fit the concept of what we've been talking about in terms of the dark cult, and also this notion, I guess, that I sort of developed that I'm going to be heading into the forest somehow in search of this ruin, this cathedral ruins with a librarian in it. And you can see I've sketched out very roughly. We've got the tower here that we're in, the witch is in, and we're sort of going along this area where we've got the resistance fighters tied to the poles. We have on the outside of our tower, it's going to be littered with the bodies of those we were defending against. And perhaps we also have this kind of abstracted sense of minions that have been helping us. I'm not really sure. Right now I'm still working with just the lone character. And again, we have this detail of the bird in flight and the outer gates. But essentially, I was choosing the monsters somewhat thematically that could kind of fit in. While I was going through it, I also pulled out what ended up being a D6 table here of just kind of more generic, simpler kinds of either NPCs, or I don't know that a ghoul would be an NPC, but just a more basic set of enemies or NPCs that I was thinking maybe would be in if we encountered a town or something. I don't know. So I created that, and I have this. And this, just as a small digression here, to just talk about this notion of the work that you do as the solo GM versus what you're doing as a player, and the concept of sort of surprise that people say is missing in solo RPGing. For me, this type of prep and this type of working with the material and looking through the rules and making a selection doesn't ruin anything. And in fact, it actually adds to and is part of the experience that I have. In the particular case of Scarlet Heroes, I think one of the things that's so great about the information you have on the Monsters of the Isles is that there's a lot of detail on them. There are paragraphs, and in some cases many paragraphs, describing the particular monster. Now, I don't think I chose Centipede Woman, so we'll just take a quick look there. When I was going through this, I looked very quickly at just the title and maybe a sentence or two at the beginning if I wasn't sure about the title. And in some cases, I knew that I wasn't going to use them. For example, I have a cat familiar with me, so I wasn't going to put a cat as an enemy. And I wanted something that was more humanoid in any case. But the point being that with Scarlet Heroes in particular, just ignoring all of this when you're creating your list, it's still going to be surprising to me if we have an encounter and we roll up this Celestial Devil. I don't really remember or know even the details of what this is. That's why I put the page number down here. So that element of surprise in that sense will still exist. And also, as I said, for me as a solo RPGer, I'm not looking to try to replicate and create some type of surprise in that regard for me, because I don't really think it's actually possible to do. So this is basically, I think we're going to come to the end of this section of the video, and this is where I would have left things and have prepped things to get to the point where you see, going back to the beginning of the video, where I'm starting the session, telling the story, and beginning to play with the actual mechanics of the game. I talked a lot about Scarlet Heroes in the recent podcast I was on, and I put the link to the podcast in the description for this video, because as I said elsewhere in the video, being on that podcast made me really want to revisit Scarlet Heroes as a rule set and demonstrate even further how the mixture of the rules and the general oracle tables can be used so effectively for the soloist. And I think you saw a bit of what it can offer here, both with the types of general oracles that I used and also with the sort of heroic nature of the combat with the fray die, and how you can basically, on the roll of one die initially in combat, without even trying to worry about initiative, almost dispense with an enemy. And that is very much the ilk of this rule set, that the heroes are larger than life and they are meant to be able to travel through the world and dispense with enemies kind of left and right and be successful at doing so. The stats and modifiers are fairly familiar to those of you who have any type of D&D background, any type of more modern OSR background. Very easy to pick up and implement. And overall, I think for one-stop shopping for somebody getting into solo RPGing, you can have everything you need really in this book. I did demonstrate the use of the 4 different types of resources that I recommend to fully flesh out a solo RPG session, rule set and a book like this being just one of them, and that is to say what I call the rubric. I demonstrated the use of other types of resources, suggestive resources, which are the board game components that I was using. This map that I was using, for example, was really the main one, and that formed a structure for my adventure and gave me a sense of place right away. Although I didn't develop it from the world of this board game, I developed it using materials in Scarlet Heroes. I demonstrated the use of various random tables to create what in essence didn't necessarily come into play so much in terms of the details of the witch's alchemy lab and the places around that. But as I was playing it and as I was doing that, it was giving me a feeling and a flavor for this character, that she was alone in her invisible school of magic, that she had once been a part of nobility, and that she had a great and good goal in mind, which is to save the good magic. And that came from the adventure tag suggested by Scarlet Heroes. And then, of course, the restrictive elements also coming from Scarlet Heroes, the oracle tables that provided some direction along the way and guidance along the way. You saw me use them almost as just a 50-50 kind of situation many times in this session when I really just wanted the dice to tell me, or the die to tell me which way to take the story. I just wanted to be at the mercy of that die roll, and that's how I use them quite a bit. I hope you enjoyed this look inside Scarlet Heroes and overall solo RPGing, to hopefully provide you with an easy way to get going into solo work and to have a rich and vibrant session.